St. Philip Neri, goes to St. Ignatius, who is his friend. St. Ignatius taught St. Philip Neri mental prayer, and they had a very close relationship. And so he thinks to himself, well, surely I can join St. Ignatius's company. And I want to go to India. I want to be a missionary there. And Ignatius, being wise in discernment, sees that Philip is not called to India and not called to be a member of his company, and tells him no and rejects him. Why is this? Because God had something else in store for St. Philip, and he had something else in store for India. And that something else was a person, the person of St. Francis Xavier, who we celebrate today, who was sent by India to set it ablaze with the love of God. Now, St. Francis Xavier was a very holy man and extremely zealous and an intense personality. He was someone who you could not leave having talked to him without having a deeper love of God. There was something palpable about his person and his presence. The Pope at the time made him a nuncio, that is an ambassador, to go to the Indies and to bring the gospel there. In spite of this lofty office in the church, when he would approach a new diocese, he would go to the bishop and present his papers, and even though he represented the Pope, he would ask permission of the bishop before he would begin his missionary work. He also, while he was entitled to servants and to a large benefice and stipends, he desired instead to live gospel simplicity and gospel poverty, renouncing his servants and living on the bare minimum that he could, using his excess for the pastoral ministry and for the service to the poor. When he arrived at India and began to engage in the missionary endeavors with greater zeal, he saw very quickly that he needed to get into the upper echelons of society in order to properly evangelize the whole of the country. And so, wanting to be all things to all men, so that by all means some might be saved, he indeed did hire servants and began to dress in the garb of the Indian hierarchy, the Indian upper echelon of society, so that he could be allowed access to them and thus give them the gospel. He ended up baptizing perhaps more than any other person in the history of the church. This is made manifest by his arm that is in the city of Rome today and is incorrupt, the arm to which he baptized hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Now, why is it that we can look at a man who, when dealing with members of the church, would renounce the wealth and the servants and the high signs of office, but when dealing with the world, gladly accepted them and used them for the sake of infiltrating society and in fact becoming friends with the world so that he could proclaim the gospel? How are these two things seemingly at odds with one another? The first reading gives us a clue where you have the lion playing with the lamb. Two things that are at total odds at one another, and yet somehow the child in their midst helps bridge the gap. Indeed, it is the Christ child whom we are preparing to welcome in Advent that shows us the way. He clothes himself with humanity, even though humanity is at that time at great odds with divinity, so that divinity might come and be reconciled with humanity, showing that sometimes concessions have to be made so that the gospel can thrive and that we can receive it well. It needs to be enfleshed in a particular context so that the souls in question can be saved. St. Francis comes at the end of his life desiring to go to China, and he lands in his missionary endeavors on an island just off the coast of the mainland, and he sees mainland China like Moses seeing the promised land. But he, also like Moses, is not able to make it. Why? Because just like St. Philip Neri wanted to go to India, St. Francis Xavier wanted to go to China, but it was not their vocation to do so. Instead, the apostle to China would be Venerable Matteo Ricci. We may have a desire to bring the gospel to a particular group of people or a particular person, but at the end of the day, it may not be our vocation to do so. It may be for another person. We must strive to be all things to all people, just like St. Francis Xavier was, just as the Christ child is, so that we can bring the gospel to those whom we interact with always and all the days of our life, sharing with them what we have seen and heard, so that they too may come to know the glory of God manifested in Christ as a child, in Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, and in Christ risen from the dead.